I don't think that Alex Albon might recover from any of this. I bet he did not see that coming. That a teammate would suddenly just come in out of nowhere and then show him up like that. And this is only just the beginning. We've got 6 more races with Franco Colapinto, 4 of them in the Americas. And now Checo has backed him. So Alex, you better be ready. Now, before you start to think that I'm calling Alex Albon washed or anything like that, I wish to make it clear. Albon is not a weak driver. Anybody who's come out the other side against Max Verstappen and gotten stronger because of it, and a second chance of F1 and showed competency and mental fortitude, they deserve to be in F1 for the long term, and what they've done with Williams is perfectly admirable. That being said though, you can easily counter that with the fact that, well, in the last 2.5 years or so, Alex hasn't really been challenged when it comes to his tenure with Williams. I know that many people admire Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargeant, calling them the GOATs of F1, but let's be real here. In the 60-odd races that Alex Albon has been with Williams, he has come out as pretty much the de facto leader and, of course, being the fastest driver. I reckon that might have actually given Alex some validity. The faith that Christian Horner still had in him, even though Red Bull dropped him, was perfectly justified, and that Williams were backing the right horse and that they were on to something really great. And again, he survived Max Verstappen and managed to come back into F1. But I will tell you something, that Franco Colapinto dive-bombing like that and Alex coming off the worst, that was not on the Thai driver's bingo card for this year, that's for sure. The flustered tone of Alex's radio message after Franco dived into turn 1, pulling off the overtake which enabled his remarkable defense against Sergio Perez later on in Singapore, that is not something that Albon could easily walk back, which he did do after the race when it became clear that what Franco did was ultimately worth it. It gave Williams the opportunity to go for a point at a track where they might not have been expecting anything. And even though he looked back on the situation and says, oh, no, Franco, oh, it's not his fault, I'm just frustrated with myself, it still brought into question all of the stuff that happened with Albon during his first stint in Formula 1 with Red Bull. And the famous quote, "They race me so hard." I'd completely forgotten about that quote until the weekend when everybody was talking about it and playing the gifs from that event when it happened on the radio. So, yeah, all of the work that Albon had done to try and big up his credibility, some of it might have been walked back by social media. Oh, let me guess, you and all the other YouTubers out there are going to be saying, is this the downfall of Alex Albon all of a sudden? No. Let's not be too hasty here, chat. Alex is still the main guy at Williams. James Vowles backs him to lead the team into their future, but this is the first time that he's had any sort of sustained challenge from the other Williams seat, whose fan base is made up of hardcore fans old and new who follow the driver unironically and with passion, not purely for the sake of GOAT memes. Going into the next 6 races, he really needs to be on his toes and think long and hard about the situation that Franco might continue to improve. The Singapore Grand Prix is the most arduous race on the calendar, only matched presently by Qatar perhaps. So when we get to Losail, if Franco can pull off something similar to what he did in Marina Bay, and maybe even more, then that might be a little bit troubling for the Thai driver. But then again, I think he might be ready for that, and we might be able to see something even bigger. We might even start to see what with the new improved Williams, or seemingly they've remained stationary while all of their competitors have gone backwards considerably, we might get a top 5 finish for Alex. And trust me, I would love to see that because that would actually give me another tick on my predictions for the season. Alex has been really good for Williams. Him as a leader has only brought positivity, and it's really encouraged the refreshing of the team into a situation now where they're in a good place at the moment. Now all of the stuff, the trials and tribulations at the beginning of the season where it was a total PR disaster, some of that now has been justified. And I bet you, James is incredibly relieved that Franco scored 4 points in his second race and eclipsing Sargeant's tally of just the singular point. Now, I of course feel sorry for Logan right now, and I am thrilled to bits that he's getting an IndyCar test and we might see a resurgence of him in the racing series that he was destined to be in before Williams took him up in their own academy. So good on you, Logan. Best of luck to you in that test, but in terms of F1, it unfortunately didn't work out. It just happens to some drivers, but with Franco, no. His move up to the big leagues, perfectly justified by Vowles, and he can now go from there. He was proven right. But having said that, his rapid adaptation to Formula 1, which threw everyone off kilter, nobody was expecting that, I do stand by my initial musings from my winners and losers video earlier in the week, that Colapinto's acclamation will be giving Alex pause for thought and even give him a little bit of a sweat regarding his future. Now, I think you don't need me to tell you that earlier on in the year, when the entire grid was up for grabs and people could move left, right and centre, everybody was doing a little bit of window shopping and trying to find interest at other teams, including Alex Albon. Even though he was firmly committed to the Williams project in the long term, that probably didn't stop him from at least having opening discussions with the big leagues such as Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari. And as reported, Mercedes and Red Bull were discussing tentative talks very early on, so there might have been an opportunity that these 2 and a bit seasons with Williams might have been enough to prove to these teams that, hey, Albon still got it. He's matured. He might be ready for a second bite at the apple. He did look like a viable option. Despite the fact that there were many options, Albon wasn't necessarily the least likely, but that still was not enough to manifest any meaningful discussions or even any offers for a seat. So it's like, okay, so these years at Williams, did it prove to be absolutely pointless, that Williams is the best that it's ever going to get for him? But I do think that the fact that he's been so good against his teammates at Williams, that might have actually counted against him. He was so good that him being the yardstick to Latifi and Sargeant, he was completely out of sight for them. So how can any top team actually quantify his ability when there is no comparison? And it wasn't really helped with how fervent James Vowles was in telling people that his driver was not for sale. Yeah, that probably would have put off a lot of people, with Vowles being so passionate in keeping Albon. He was just going, no, this boy is mine, you can't have him, I found him, even though I technically didn't. Jos Capito and the Williams Bull before me found him, but I still kept him. Oh, Carlos, hello. But to be fair, Horner has been sympathetic toward Albon, more than with most Red Bull dropouts, and he did talk to Albon as a potential replacement for Checo if it came to it very early on. But in the wake of Toto Wolff throwing a temper tantrum regarding his Red Bull connections when he arrived at Williams in the first place, Albon did have to cut ties with Red Bull as his main partner. He remained a sponsor for 2022, but after that, it diminished into just a token sponsorship with their Monsoon Valley brand, which mostly is known for making ciders and grape juice. So yeah, when you look at it that way, Toto's insistence that he dropped major Red Bull backing might have counted against him going back to Red Bull, especially when it comes to like how much money Checo brings to the table, and not to mention for the fact that his influence in the Americas is absolutely remarkable. So it does ultimately make me think that yeah, Albon is a good draw, but I don't think he's that good of a draw to replace Sergio with him. And whilst that's been going on, Colapinto has been electrifying the F1 world, brought points for Williams, and brings money to the discussion with his Argentine sponsors dropping supposedly nearly $5 million for his 9-race stint, which might be quite handy for the team. According to the Destructors Championship, by the way, all of that is an estimate, it's been about $5 million worth of damage that both Albon and Sargeant have actually caused the team. So it's not just Logan causing these crashes, Alex has had his fair share, and of course Franco did have his little ding in Baku, so that's something to really take into consideration here. But the fact is though, is that Franco has done so much in such a short space of time, culminating in a really cute clip that I saw in the drivers' parade around Singapore, where even though Hamilton had talked with Colapinto before, Colapinto could not pluck up the courage to just walk up to Lewis and say hello. That just shows how endearing this kid is. Oh man, Franco, we are gonna miss you. And I know you might be thinking, oh, you've just got rose-tinted spectacles. You're in the honeymoon period. You're just like with Liam Lawson last year. Well, yeah, maybe. But 8th place in your second race, when nobody saw you coming, and you were pretty much on par with your much more experienced teammate in a Williams, which is difficult to drive, as was proven by Logan. That counts for something. And in some ways in Baku, you could argue that Franco's impact really downplayed Alex's achievement of 7th place, which equaled his best ever finish for the team. Franco finished only a few seconds behind, and it's because of his points, those 4 points, that managed to leapfrog Williams ahead of Alpine in the Constructors. That brought them $10 million. So as you can probably tell, James Vowles is electrified right now. He is absolutely giddy. He is on cloud 9 at the moment. His plan to basically become the next generation of Ross Brawn is really coming along quite nicely. He's managed to bag Carlos Sainz for the team next year to give Williams its best lineup in nearly 20 years. And now he's managed to justify the Williams Academy's existence in having a hotshot rookie who's an absolute gem. And even though Logan didn't work out, that's true there, Franco has managed to actually completely throw all of that into complete relief. And as Franco develops more and more understanding and familiarity with the FW46, and it's proving to be a case that he is really, really quite good at it, and it's really appealing to his driving style, that maybe VCarb and Haas might need to take a serious look and worry about how quickly Williams is coming along and how far they've fallen back over the course of the season. And even Aston Martin might have to just gingerly look back and go, oh, okay, Williams has suddenly become quite interesting. And not for this year, 5th place is safe, but next year though, that could be interesting, because even though Adrian Newey is going to Aston Martin, and people think that he's going to make an impact immediately, he's not going to. He's going to be working on the 2026 car. So then we can talk about Aston Martin being back up there. But next year, it's probably going to be more of the same, and Williams might be right on them. And yes, we're only a third of the way into Colapinto's 2024 tenure with Williams, and a lot more can happen in the time before we get to Abu Dhabi. Alex might kick on and reassert his leadership dominance and completely wipe the floor with Colapinto going into the final rounds. But then again, I think we can easily counter that chestnut with the fact of where we are going next. Yes, we've got 2 triple headers with a 3-week break in the middle, which I still think is absolutely broken. Why do we need these back-to-backs and triple headers at the end? If we just had one race every 2 weeks, we would not be starved with 2 long breaks. But anyway, we're going to Austin, Mexico City, Interlagos, Ned's Sao Paulo, and then back to Las Vegas, all in the Americas. And with the revelation of what Sergio Perez said after his little battle with Franco, that he said that he didn't put a foot wrong and that he had really good fun battling against him, Franco holding back a Red Bull, and he only succumbed to the fact that the Red Bull was able to undercut him in the pit, so it's down to strategy that Franco didn't remain ahead. Energize his fans, Checo's fans, in the Americas to suddenly be well-wishers of Colapinto and cheer him on as well as Sergio. And then when we get to Interlagos, oh, it's going to be absolutely deafening. They're going to completely swarm the track. Tickets will be sold out. Maybe Alex might be booed because he might be the villain who might get in Colapinto's way. No, I hope that doesn't happen though, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. And that's especially when you consider that Franco has been running older front suspension than him. And by the time we get to Austin and the rest of the season, I believe that the Williams, the spec on both cars will be exactly the same, that they might be getting the upgrades at the same time if there are any left. So they'll be on an even keel, and we will continue to see how Franco does as he acclimates to the car. And then by the time we get to Abu Dhabi, a track which he has already got some experience with in his F2 tenure, I think at the end of last year, then he might actually turn out to be absolutely fantastic. He might score some good points. And it's also become quite evident for people that follow me from South America that even though Franco is Argentinian, the Brazilian contingent do back him and wish him well. But I think that might change if Gabriel Bortoleto gets on the grid, as well as Colapinto in the future. That might change, but for now, everyone in South America is backing Franco, and that's fantastic. I'm really, really pleased and proud about the impact that Franco has made, and he's such a nice kid that this completely eclipses what Lawson did. Lawson energized an entire country, that is New Zealand. Franco, his presence in Formula One and his competency and bringing points to Argentina for the first time in 4 decades, this has energized an entire continent. A continent. That kind of thing is making me think, and it's making me bring out the foam of doubt. What happens with Alex should Franco continue to score points and perhaps out-qualify him a couple of times more before the end of the year? Now, whilst Alex will probably be still the stronger driver of the two, down to the fact that he is perfectly optimised for the Williams machinery and the team, as well as his general experience in being in Formula One for a good few years, I do think it is a situation where you can start to have the discussion about what would happen next, because, as we all know, Franco does not have a seat in Formula One at the moment, and his future is a little bit vague. And what we've seen already is still some really good points for thought when it comes to Colapinto's ability, because Singapore, it's a driver breaker. It is one of the hardest tracks on the grid, and Colapinto just about survived. He did not have any mistakes. He managed to pull off an executed maneuver into turn 1, a dive bomb, not taking anybody out, and making it work, he stayed on the track. Brilliant. And even though Alex did actually walk back his initial outburst in the media pen afterward, it's not going to make a dent in terms of the public consensus that he was rattled. And it's now brought up the question concerning 2025. How will he stack up against another Red Bull outcast? One who I probably reckon was dropped for even worse reasons than Albon was. Carlos, he was dropped by Red Bull as part of a sweetener package to get Renault to go away, to allow Toro Rosso to be powered by Honda engines and begin their partnership, which would last for several seasons. And Renault accepted the deal because they were getting Carlos Sainz, and he had really shown his colours against Max Verstappen and proved to be quite competent. But unfortunately, there was no more room at the inn at Red Bull Racing because Christian Horner was quite happy with Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo. Thank you very much for the reasonable future. And then, okay, Carlos might have been sad, and yeah, fine, but hey, he was getting a nice position at Renault, he was around Nico Hülkenberg, Renault were actually quite good in 2018. This might be the start of a really nice long-term career with their former power units. So, oh, okay, Daniel Ricciardo's turned up, okay, he's gone to McLaren. And then we get to where we are today. And Sainz did do well at Ferrari, and even though Williams is a step down at present for him, it could be an opportunity for the long term for him to be their next lead driver, and it might threaten Albon's position there considerably in Williams' next chapter. Now, given that Valls has gone on record multiple times that data counts for everything, which is why Mick Schumacher was snubbed, it really makes it clear that Williams is a meritocracy, that you have to be continuously getting results for that team, or else your place there might be brought into question. And if Carlos Sainz arrives and completely dominates against Alex, it will throw all of that hard work that Albon had done over the last few years into question, whether it was actually anything that had integrity. And therefore, it might get tongues wagging about, well, how come he's still here and Franco's been booted back to Formula 2 or something like that? Or worse, stuck in reserve driver purgatory, because now he's done more than 2 races. He can't do any more FP1 sessions for Williams or any other team. And ultimately, Carlos might be the new guiding light, the new poster child of Williams that Valls might want to cling on to. Alex might have served his purpose and then be just thrown out, left out in the cold, or even out of a job. And it really doesn't help that Valls has made it his mission to get Franco a seat in Formula 1, throwing his hat into the ring with Sauber to convince them to not sign Bortoleto from the McLaren programme, which is being touted, and instead plumb for his own pupil, to which supposedly Sauber has shown rather little interest in. And the consensus seems to be that Valtteri Bottas has warranted a stay of execution for 1 more year, with a possible scenario that next year Bortoleto might be their reserve driver, and it's just making me think, oh my God! This is the worst possible outcome for Sauber. Sauber desperately needs positive headlines right now, and this is probably the worst, because you don't come out of this, Sauber, good at all. You hang on to Bottas, who clearly is not doing very well. He's not going to be getting that Audi seat. Him being there 1 more year and not with Audi, that's just going to turn the screw even more, that he's not going to sup the German automaker goodness. Then you get Bortoleto just waiting his turn in the wings. Zhou's not even there, so they're going to lose out on some capital. Théo Pourchaire, who is Sauber Academy's reserve driver and been test driver, he gets snubbed. And then Zane Maloney, yeah, okay, he's off to Formula E, so it's just making the Sauber Academy look like a complete and utter joke. We joke about all the other ones, but at least Alpine's getting Jack Doohan in on the grid. Red Bull have proven track records before. Ferrari have had their fair share of goodness, now with Oliver Behrman as well. Mercedes, even with Kimi Antonelli. What's Sauber bringing to the table? So we're going to get a situation where neither Bortoleto or Colapinto will be on the grid next year, and that will be an utter shame. And okay, if they choose Théo Pourchaire to pilot alongside Nico Hülkenberg, I'd be like, okay, fair, fine. He's waited his turn, he deserves a chance. But other than that, boo! So, okay, what happens then? What does Franco do for 2025? Does he become a reserve driver? Does he go back to Formula 2, maybe with MP Motorsport? Or does he maybe, as some of my Twitter followers have suggested, go to Super Formula? It seemed to do good things for Liam Lawson. He himself praised it was really good preparation for Formula 1, and look what he did there, so that might happen to Franco as well. And not to mention, it would be cheaper for Williams to fund than another Formula 2 campaign, Super Formula. That might be a really good ticket, and as we saw with Zach O'Sullivan, Williams aren't exactly flush with cash or inclined to pay for a whole season. And whilst that might be frugal, Super Formula doesn't really bring the brand awareness that F2 does, and that could be a risk to Colapinto's stock amongst the community. Because look what happened with Ayumu Iwasa. He was touted to be potentially a Red Bull junior driver for the future in Formula 1, but now nobody talks about him because Super Formula does not get coverage in the West. I forgot about Iwasa. He was in the V-Carb car at Suzuka. That's how recently he's been in F1 press, and then suddenly we forget about him. And that's a shame too, because Super Formula is really, really good. And that car is just as good as an F2 car. But seriously, I think my Twitter followers are right. Maybe Williams should fund a season in Super Formula for Franco to give him some really, really good training away from the public eye maybe. VALS knows what Franco can do. Maybe away from the public eye, Franco could then hone his skills even more in a car which seems to be a really good facsimile to Formula 1 these days, and Franco might be able to go for a championship. He'll be doing something which might be the detriment of Liam Lawson because he's not been doing any active racing this year. He's mostly been doing promotional stuff, simulator work. He's not been actually going toe-to-toe with racing drivers. None of that at all. Well, that might change now, but it would have been useful back early on in the year. But Williams does have to be active in promoting that Super Formula campaign if they do choose to do it and partner with an existing Super Formula team. And VALS is going to do what he can. I know he will, because that academy now has a star in it. Like Antonelli, like Behrman. He should really be holding on to this with both hands. Yeah, 2025, that's sewn up right now. Maybe 2026 as well. But after that, who knows? Oh, and by the way, shout out to Leah Block in F1 Academy. This has actually been her first season in single-seaters, and she's been improving quite nicely. 2 fourth places in Singapore. Good job, Leah. And with James wanting to move Williams into the future and get back on its feet, might Albon lose out on all of those good times, having helped steady the ship for the team in some of their darkest days? Perhaps. Because VALS is very clear that he wants results and he wants a lineup that can last well into the future. And Sainz has committed himself until 2028. At most. Yes, there is a clause in his contract in theory he could break away in a couple of years if the team doesn't deliver. But that is a solid commitment somewhat for the Spaniard to commit the first part of his 30s with one team, and that they will be backing him wholeheartedly. Albon might miss on all of that. He might have already had his glory with Williams. And I want Albon and Sainz to do really well, bring the team back up, and really show that Williams is not to be completely sniffed at. But at the same time, Colapinto has come along and shown what he can do, and VALS is all about the future as well, because remember, back at Mercedes, he was one of the leaders of the junior program there, which found Kimi Antonelli. So now VALS might want to do the same thing with the Williams Academy and big it up. Sure, it didn't work out with Logan Sargeant, but it's come on leaps and bounds and show that Franco, he's the real deal and part of this new generation of drivers, which is now showing up in Formula 1, and I'm all for it. That's fantastic. But whatever happens with Alex, it was a rude awakening, and he was caught napping. And the FIA might be caught napping as well, because the pressure from F1's drivers could soon mount a challenge against the FIA, in the wake of the governing body's push to stamp out cursing, which hit Max where it hurt. And to find out why I think all of this, aside from Max threatening to quit, might be cementing his legacy in the sport, not just the titles, go and watch this video next.